Vegan side effect. You will be more successful.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
In a span of just 10 years, he created nearly 900 paintings and became one of the most iconic figures to lead the Modernism movement in art. His very name instills in one the true spirit of the artist, an artist who was ahead of his time. Vincent van Gogh, Infusing Life and Heart into Each Brushstroke, Part 1 of 3. Continue watching to find out more.
Goedendag, berichtdenkende kijkers. Means good day, broad-minded viewers. A time-honored greeting in Dutch. I am Tessa. The amicable Dutch people are inspired by your resolute ideal to create a peaceful and compassionate world. May heaven allow all of your positive visions to come true. Welcome to our show, Vincent van Gogh, Infusing Life and Heart into Each Brushstroke, Part 1 of 3. Vincent van Gogh is one of the most prominent Post-Impressionist painters and is generally regarded as the greatest Dutch painter since Rembrandt van Rijn. After deciding to be an artist at the age of 27, he produced nearly 900 paintings and more than 1,000 works on paper in the short 10-year span of his artistic career. While the Impressionists tried to achieve synthetic depictions of the subjects according to what appeared before their eyes, Van Gogh stepped further away from artistic conventions by expressing on canvas the emotions and states of mind that the subjects evoked, as he wrote in a letter to his brother Theo.
Real painters do not paint things as they are. They paint them as they themselves feel them to be.
Through his arbitrary use of color, emphatic, unrestrained brushstrokes, and contoured forms along with the dynamic relationships expressed among his subjects, his emotions and the viewer's reactions, Van Gogh had an enormous influence on Fauvism, Expressionism, and Modernism, and continues to inspire artists up to the present day. The powerful emotions and pictorial language of Van Gogh's art touch people profoundly. His works have also been highly sought after by art collectors since the latter half of the 20th century, and paintings such as Vase with 15 sunflowers, irises, and Portrait of Dr. Gachet have continually been setting price records at auctions. Yet sadly, Van Gogh constantly struggled with poverty while he was alive. Over time, however, he did become fully recognized for his artistic genius, and on June 2, 1973, the Van Gogh Museum honoring the iconic artist opened in Amsterdam after 10 years of preparation. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, in Groot-Zundert, the Netherlands. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a minister of the Dutch Reformed Church, and his mother, Anna Cornelia Carpenters, was a religious woman from a bookbinding family in The Hague. Vincent was the first surviving child among 6 siblings and was named after his grandfather. Vincent was taught by his mother and a governess when he was young, and was encouraged to draw alongside his mother, an amateur artist herself. Once he reached school age, Vincent was sent to the village school, followed by 4 years at various schools away from home. In 1869, after an austere and cold and sterile youth, as described by Van Gogh himself, one of his art dealer uncles helped Vincent obtain an apprenticeship at the Hague branch of the Goupil & Cie art dealership, the same starting point for his younger brother Theo, who later became the main source of Vincent's financial and moral support. After completing his training in 1873, Vincent began working for the same art dealership's London branch. Although he enjoyed a happy, youthful, and successful life in London, Vincent experienced his first unrequited love there with Eugénie Loyer, his landlady's daughter. After his profession of love to Eugénie was rejected, Vincent became increasingly isolated and interested in religion. His family tried to help by transferring him to the dealership's Paris branch. However, by April 1876, he was dismissed for not being enthusiastic about his work. After unsuccessfully working at several small jobs, Vincent's desire to serve humanity and his strong interest in religion led him to pursue a clerical life. In January 1879, he began working as a temporary preacher at Petit-Vosmont in Borinage, an impoverished coal mining region in Belgium. Due to his deep empathy and compassion, he gave away his worldly possessions to the poor, shared his food with the needy, gave the lodgings arranged for him as a missionary by the church to a homeless person, and slept on straw in a hut. Despite Vincent having earned the nickname the Christ of the Coal Mine, the church authorities discontinued his term for following Christian doctrine too literally and having failed to maintain the dignity of the priesthood. Vincent stayed with the community for a few more months until October 1880. The crush of his earnest longing to serve humanity as a clergyman sent him into depression. He found consolation in art and took up drawing to record the people and their harsh living conditions in charcoal sketches. Meanwhile, he also discovered the solace that art could bring.
Art is to console those who are broken by life and leads to God.
By then, he realized that being an artist was his real vocation. Bright viewers, we'll now pause for a moment to hear a brief message. We'll return shortly. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television. Vegan side effect: you will have more immunity. Welcome back to a show on the life and work of the extraordinary Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. Upon Theo's recommendation and with his financial help, Vincent moved to Brussels in late 1880 and briefly studied art with the Dutch artist Willem Roelofs, as well as anatomy and the rules of modeling and perspective at the Académie Royale des Beaux-Arts of Brussels. From then on, Theo, who understood and believed in Vincent, assumed the role of Vincent's financial benefactor, art promoter, and advisor. Theo had been close to Vincent since childhood, and the two brothers cherished a lifelong friendship. Their correspondence from 1872, when Vincent began his apprenticeship at The Hague, until the end of Vincent's life, especially the 600-plus diary-like letters from Vincent, offers a rich and precious record of the artist's emotions, beliefs, physical and mental states, and daily activities, along with his thoughts and theories on art. In the spring of 1881, Vincent returned home to stay with his parents for several months. During this period, he fell in love with his widowed cousin, Cornelia Adriana Verstreker, known as Key. When Vincent confessed his love for her and proposed marriage, she refused him, but he persevered in hope that with time his love might change her mind. Later that year, Vincent visited Key's family in Amsterdam and reaffirmed his love for her. Key and her parents' refusal pushed Vincent further down into despair over his desire for familial affection. At the end of 1881, Vincent's second cousin, Anton Mauve, an eminent painter of the Hague School, accepted him as a student. Mr. Mauve introduced Vincent to painting in watercolors and oils and helped him set up a studio. However, Mr. Mauve's tutelage ended abruptly, perhaps due to his disapproval of Vincent's relationship with Miss Clausina Maria Hornig, known as Sienne, a sorrowful woman with an unfortunate past. They were lovers, and Sienne modeled for many of Vincent's works. However, their relationship did not work out, and Vincent left Sienne in late 1883. Although his termination by Mr. Mauve saddened him, Vincent's reverence for and gratitude towards him was unchanged. On March 30th, 1888, upon hearing the news of Mr. Mauve's passing, Vincent dedicated one of his most famous paintings, Pink Peach Trees, also known as Souvenir de Mauve, to his memory. During most of 1884 and 1885, Vincent stayed with his family after they moved to Nuenen, the Netherlands. He feverishly drew and painted figures, still lifes, and landscapes, and grew more assured about his work. Throughout his decade-long artistic career, nature and honest members of the working class with which Vincent identified remained two of his fondest subjects. He once said,
"I work as diligently on my canvases as the laborers do in their fields."
The Potato Eaters is one of the most representative works from the period. Vincent produced the painting between April and May 1885, after numerous sketches and preparatory drafts. The painting is composed of 5 figures sitting around a small table sharing the hard-earned meal in a simple, primitive setting. The entire painting is governed by a dark, earthy tone, a typical color treatment of Vincent's early period. Coarse application of paint, incorrect proportions, unrefined poses, and figure arrangements, in addition to a depressive mood, reflect the harsh realities of peasant life. Vincent portrays a family that have tilled the earth themselves with these hands they're putting in the dish, that they have thus honestly earned their food. The pictorial language expresses Vincent's extraordinary empathy and earnest feelings toward his subject and denotes his personal commentary on it. This, Vincent's first large-scale multi-figure work, is regarded as one of his masterpieces and is now under the care of the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Vincent was pleased with the outcome of the Potato Eaters, and in November 1885 packed it with his belongings in the only suitcase he brought to Antwerp, where he enrolled in the Antwerp Academy. Although Vincent rebelled against the Academy's doctrine of classical beauty, he benefited significantly from his stay in Antwerp. Vincent frequented the city's museums and churches to study Peter Paul Rubens' work, and also discovered Japanese prints, which had a lasting influence on his work. Disagreeing with the Academy's rigid teaching methods, he left Antwerp at the beginning of March 1886 and headed to Paris, a turning point in Vincent's artistic development. Welcome to our show, Vincent van Gogh, Infusing Life and Heart into Each Brushstroke, Part 2 of 3. Vincent van Gogh, born in 1853, is one of the most beloved artists in the history of art, although he was mostly unappreciated in his lifetime. Being the eldest son of a pastor, Vincent grew up in the southern Netherlands and worked unsuccessfully as an art dealer, and then briefly as a teacher, bookseller, and lay preacher in a mining community in southern Belgium. In 1880, at the age of 27, he found his vocation in art and devoted the rest of his life to perfecting his expressive language in this form in order to serve humanity. Vincent once said, "I want to give the wretched a brotherly message. When I sign my paintings, Vincent, it is as one of them." From then on, Vincent lived an extremely austere life, often having to make a choice between pigments and food. He was not commercially successful and sold only one painting during his lifetime. His brother Theo, an art dealer, provided him with much-needed financial and moral support. Although he received a few brief introductory lessons at the beginning of his artistic career and later studied at the Antwerp Academy for a few months, Vincent was largely self-taught, practicing feverishly and absorbing inspiration from works by old masters such as Rembrandt, Frans Hals, and Peter Paul Rubens. Contemporary artists he admired, in particular Jean-François Millet, had a profound influence on Vincent's artistic development, especially on choosing the rural life as a subject matter. The two artists shared a common view of great respect for farmers and laborers. In 1886, Vincent arrived in Paris, the cultural center of the world at the time. He moved in with Theo and studied for 2 months at Fernand Comon's studio, the Atelier Comon, where he met and befriended fellow students Émile Bernard, Louis Anquetin, and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. In Paris, Impressionist works were easily accessible at the time, and Theo himself kept Impressionist paintings in his own gallery. He introduced Vincent to Camille Pissarro, Georges Seurat, and other similar artists. In addition, Vincent grew more fascinated with Japanese ukiyo-e woodcut prints and began to collect them. Vincent even imitated a few of them, as in his Bridge in the Rain, for instance. Not only did the beauty of Japanese art inspire Vincent, but also the naturalism and philosophy they expressed spoke to his heart. Later, in his letter to Theo from September 24, 1888, Vincent wrote,
"Just think of that. Isn't it almost a new religion that these Japanese teach us, who are so simple and live in nature as if they themselves were flowers? And we wouldn't be able to study Japanese art, it seems to me, without becoming much happier and more cheerful, and it makes us return to nature, despite our education and our work in a world of convention."
In 1887, Vincent came across the magazine Paris Illustré Le Japon, issued in May 1886, with a cover featuring a reproduction of revered Japanese artist Keisai Eisen's courtesan wearing uchikake with dragon design. He used a grid to copy and enlarge the figure and painted Japonazari or ran, known as the courtesan, after Keisai Eisen, framing it with the Asian motifs of bamboo, cranes, and water lilies. This Japanese influence had a lasting impact on Vincent's art and is evident in the works of his later years. On May 15, 1886, the Impressionists held their 8th and last exhibition at the Maison Dorée restaurant. Works displayed during the show indicated the coming of a new current forming in the growing waters of Impressionism, namely Georges Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. The French art critic Félix Finion invented the term New Impressionism to describe the coming artistic movement in his review of the exhibition. Marked by Seurat's pointillism, which involves juxtaposing small dots of complementary colors for optical effect, a group of rebellious artists who were looking for new directions for their creative expressions parted ways with Impressionism. In 1887, Vincent arranged an exhibition at the Restaurant du Cholet for paintings by Émile Bernard, Louis Anquetin, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, Arnold Hendrik Koenig, and himself. Bernard and Anquetin sold their first paintings, and Vincent made an exchange with the painter Paul Gauguin, whom he had just met. Creative viewers, we'll now pause for a moment for a brief message. We'll return shortly. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television.
Vegan man, how handsome!
Welcome back to a show featuring world-renowned Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. From March 1886 to February 1888, while staying in Paris, Vincent was exposed to the works of the Impressionists, observed the innovations of the Post-Impressionists, and became enthused with Japanese art. Under these influences, his style underwent significant changes, and his palette became lighter and more vibrant, with the elements of pointillism and Japanese prints becoming visible in his works. Portrait of Pierre Tanguy, painted in 1887, is the culminating work of more than 200 paintings Vincent finished in this period. The sitter Julien François Tanguy, called Pierre Tanguy, Father Tanguy, as the artist looked upon him as a father figure, owned an art supply shop in Paris where the artists often met. The shop also displayed the works of artists such as Paul Cézanne, Georges Seurat, Paul Gauguin, and Vincent van Gogh, who were later considered the leading lights of modern art. Vincent painted 3 portraits of Pierre Tanguy, with the Paris version being the final one. The transition from the initial darker color tone of the Copenhagen portrait to the final vibrant and cheerful Paris version illustrates Vincent's artistic evolution. The complementary colors, painted with short broken brushstrokes, especially on the shade and the sitter's pants area, is unmistakable of pointillism's influence. The space between the sitter and the background that is incorporated into many Japanese ukiyo-e genre prints is flat, one of the typical post-impressionist space treatments. Although Vincent observed and absorbed what he learned in Paris, he always stood firmly on the foundation of his own unique style, along with the heartfelt messages he wanted to express. However, large cities were never ideal environments for Vincent. Despite the artistic stimulation, he found life in Paris physically and mentally exhausting after living there for nearly 2 years. Vincent longed for outdoor living and communing with nature under the sun. In February 1888, he departed Paris for Arles, a town in Provence, south of France. After spring arrived, the blossoming fruit trees incited Vincent's optimism. This joyful scenery also reminded him of what he saw in Japanese art. He enjoyed long walks around Arles and visited nearby villages. His artistry also blossomed, and his inspiration and aspiration made his Arles period more prolific. Flowing trees, open fields, laboring farmers, and bridges are the motifs he painted with intense color and great enthusiasm. He also started to experiment more with color applications. In the beginning of May 1888, Vincent rented the 4 rooms of the Yellow House at 2 Place Lamartine. He temporarily used it as a studio and storage area and took time to decorate and furnish the rooms and prepared them for a commune in the south for like-minded artists. In September, Vincent painted Yellow House. In the letter he wrote to his brother, Theo, on September 29, 1888, he drew a pencil sketch of the composition of this painting. The right wing of the building in the painting was rented by the artist. Vincent used the 2 large rooms on the ground floor for a workshop and kitchen, and the 2 upstairs rooms as bedrooms. The bedroom on the right corner, with both shutters open, is Vincent's guest room, where Gauguin later lived briefly. The room next to it, with the shutters almost closed, is Vincent's bedroom. In the same letter, Vincent wrote,
Likewise, croquis of a square number 30 canvas, showing the house and its surroundings under a sulfur sun, under a pure cobalt sky. That's a really difficult subject. But I want to conquer it for that very reason. Because it's tremendous, these yellow houses in the sunlight, and then the incomparable freshness of the blue. All the grounds yellow too.
Vincent used 2 complementary primary colors in the painting, blue for the sky and yellow for what is on the ground, to make the whole painting more vibrant. Yellow gradually became a symbolic color for Vincent, and he used it increasingly from the Ars period onward. The yellow house was a symbol of the aspiration that he looked forward to fulfilling. Welcome to our show, Vincent van Gogh, Infusing Life and Heart into Each Brushstroke, Part 3 of 3. In his early years, the beloved Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh worked unsuccessfully at various jobs. Then, in 1880, at the age of 27, he decided to become a full-time artist. Later, during the 2 years he spent in Paris, Vincent's art underwent a profound transformation. At the beginning of 1888, he traveled to Arles and found sanctuary in the warm sun and vibrant colors of Provence. On May 1st of that year, Vincent rented part of the so-called Yellow House, where he dreamt of making a studio of the South and of starting an artists' collective community. His much-beloved series of sunflower paintings was created to decorate the house. Vincent produced 2 series of sunflower paintings as still-life works. The first was painted in Paris in 1887, and the other, more well-known series was executed in Arles between 1888 and 1889. Back in December 1887, in Paris, he had exchanged 2 of his Paris sunflower paintings for a work by the French Post-Impressionist artist Paul Gauguin, and Gauguin liked the paintings very much. Although the symbolism widely employed in Flemish paintings should not have been unfamiliar to a Dutch artist like Vincent, he had his own way of using symbols. The choice of sunflowers to decorate Gauguin's room was not only a friendly, welcoming gesture, as Gauguin loved the sunflowers Vincent had painted in Paris, but perhaps also conveyed a hint of his admiration for Gauguin. For Vincent, sunflowers also symbolized warmth and gratitude, reflecting the optimism and hope in his mind at the time. The sunflowers in the paintings were deliberately arranged in ways to represent different blooming and seeding stages, thus embodying the cycle of life. In these works, we can see Vincent's experiments in using a wide spectrum of yellows and in applying pigments. Some areas are like a relief on which he squeezes the pigments out of the tube directly onto the canvas. In the summer of 1888, Vincent began painting nocturnal scenes, as in Café Terrace at Night and Starry Night over the Rhone. In Café Terrace at Night, the warm yellow in the terrace area smoothly transits to the blue of the neighboring structures, veiled by the evening light, and the foreshortened lines guide our eyes to the depth of the street. Above the narrow opening between the dark silhouettes of the dwellings, contrasted with the busy cafe, the serene sky is adorned with brilliant stars. This is the first of Vincent's 3 starry sky paintings. Vincent first met Gauguin in Paris, and the primitive, poetic, and mystical elements in Gauguin's work deeply impressed Vincent and Theo. Vincent invited Gauguin to come and paint with him, and looked up to him as his mentor with deep sincerity. Gauguin arrived in Arles on October 23, 1888. In the subsequent 2 months, he and Vincent painted together, discussed art and their techniques, and influenced each other. On Gauguin's suggestion, Vincent tried to paint from memory and imagination, such as in the Red Vineyard, the only work Vincent saw during his lifetime. However, their differences deteriorated their friendship. Vincent, with his earnest heart and intense, volatile personality, enthusiastically visualized his dream of the Studio of the South with Gauguin's participation, while Gauguin, the man of the world, had his own idea about his stay in Arles. Their differences resulted in many fervid disputes. Gauguin's intention to leave Arles shattered Vincent's utopian dream of brotherhood and an artist's commune, and he fell into depression. Among many other factors, their fierce arguments escalated the tension between them and finally triggered Vincent's mental breakdown and self-mutilation on December 23, 1888. Vincent was hospitalized for 2 weeks, and after that time was no longer his old self and struggled with many relapses. His neighbors organized a petition demanding that he move out of the Yellow House. Although Vincent unrelentingly picked up his paintbrush between his relapses, he was racked with feelings of extreme loneliness. Gentle viewers, we'll now pause for a moment to hear a brief message. We'll return shortly. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television.
Vegan, God loves the benevolent.
Welcome back to our show on world-renowned Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. On May 8, 1889, Vincent voluntarily entered St. Paul de Mausolée Asylum in Saint-Rémy de Provence. Vincent was granted a studio, and many of his best-known works were created there, among them the beloved Starry Night. Starry Night was painted through a combination of Vincent's memories, his imagination, and his observations through the barred window of his room. The entire painting is governed by a spectrum of blue. In the midst of the sleeping village, the roof of the little church breaks the continuous mountain line connecting the poetic and dynamic starry sky. The work emits transcendental energy and reveals a celestial wonder, just as Vincent wrote to Theo on August 18, 1888.
Still to feel the stars and the infinite clearly up there, then life is almost magical after all.
The painting is now housed in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, New York. While he was in Saint-Rémy, Vincent painted from views through his window, and due to a shortage of subject matter, he also painted some facsimiles of the works of artists he admired, in addition to some repetitions of his own works. During his much appreciated supervised walks, Vincent painted the hospital interior, nearby fields, and the hospital garden. One of the works from this period is Irises, which sold for $53.9 million at Sotheby's in 1987, a record-setting auction price at the time. From the beginning of the year 1890, Vincent's works began to gain recognition. He was invited to participate in the exhibitions of Les 20, as well as the Société des Artistes Indépendants, in which the leading French Impressionist painter Claude Monet commented that Vincent's work was the best in show. In May 1890, upon Theo's suggestion, Vincent was discharged from the asylum in Saint-Rémy and moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, a suburb of Paris, to be nearer to Dr. Paul Gachet and Theo. During the last 2 months of his life, he painted nearly 70 works. In these paintings, we see the culmination of Vincent's achievement in the maturity of his style, the boldness in the use of color, and the expressiveness of his brushwork. Among these paintings, the portrait of Dr. Gachet was another record breaker at an auction 100 years after it was painted. On July 27, 1890, Vincent came home with a gunshot wound in the chest and died 30 hours later with Theo by his side. 6 months later, Theo also passed away. The two brothers were buried side by side at the Auvers-sur-Oise cemetery. Wheat Field with Crows, a painting filled with ill omens, is claimed to be Vincent's last finished work. Vincent left an enormous legacy following his short creative career and fleeting life. His works speak eloquently of his hope, devotion, love, and sensibilities, as well as his sadness, extreme loneliness, and unrelenting struggles. Soon after Vincent's death, a new generation of artists found inspiration in his art, and before long, his paintings received enthusiastic recognition. They were elevated to one of the most adored series of works in art history. This staggering contrast unfolds a sad revelation, as our beloved Supreme Master Ching Hai earnestly advised.
I feel the world should encourage artists more in different ways, should appreciate more their work, offer them more recognition and appreciation, offer more support, and offer more respect in all ways, all means, all aspects. And above all, not wait until they leave our world in misery, then sell their soul-stirring, heart-touching products for millions of dollars, while the artists themselves struggle with meager existence when they are alive among us.
Like a shooting star, Vincent van Gogh flashed across our earthly sky and left one of history's most blazing trajectories, forever brightening the hearts of the viewers.
Starry, starry night, flaming flowers that brightly blaze, swirling clouds in violet haze, reflect in Vincent's eyes of china blue, colors change in hue, morning hues of amber grain, weathered faces lying in pain are soothed beneath the artist's loving hand. Now I understand what you try to say to me, how you suffered for your sanity, how you tried to set them free. They would not listen, they did not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now, for they could not love you, but still your love was true. And when no hope was left in sight on that starry, starry night, you took your life as lovers often do. But I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one. as beautiful as you.
I seek, I pursue, my heart is in it.
Magnanimous viewers, thank you for your company today during Vincent van Gogh, Infusing Life and Heart into Each Brushstroke, Part 3 of 3. May God bless you with vibrant health and happiness.
Vegan, the answer to our conscience.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/AJAR.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule et suprememastertv.com/AJAR.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule y suprememastertv.com/AJAR.
I nostri programmi sono offerti in molte lingue. Consultate suprememastertv.com/schedule e suprememastertv.com/AJAR